Welcome back. Today's lesson we will talk about helpers in HTML using MVC. This is Bob Dust, your instructor in the ITP 244 and 245 course. So what is a helper? A helper is a class that will produce a string of HTML code that we can then fit into our web page. If you remember extension methods from our C#2 class, we can take a class and add our own stuff to it. So if you can't find what you want to do with a helper, we will learn in the next tutorial how to add our own extension methods. So in a view in MVC, helpers begin with the @HTML symbol. So if we take a look at our student index page that we did from before, you'll see we have some HTML mixed in with some HTML helpers in our view page. So let's look at some of this a little more closer. So first one we look at is something called an action link. An action link creates an anchor tag, which is a link to another page. In this example, it's a link to a controller that has the word or the phrase create new that will display in the web page, and then it will redirect the user to the create action in our controller. Another HTML helper we see is in the middle called display name for. What display name for does is it will look at our model, in this case, go to the full name property, and whatever is in our model's data annotations for that will display in this line. Next, you see we have display for. This is similar to display name for. The difference is that this will show us the data value for the full name of the student. And then the last one, we have three more action links for edit, details, and delete. So here are the three helpers in this page here: action link, display name for, and display for. So let's take a look at our web page to see what the result of this code is. So here you see our web page. We have three students. We have the create new tag. We have the name, the title of the student means student, the three students, and then three sets of links. So here is the result of our action link from before. This is the display name for is the student. And then we have a for each loop that has a series of display for in there that shows the value of the student name. And then the last one, we have some more action links for edit, details, and delete for each student. So let's take a look at the source code now and see how this equates to the, let's look at the HTML source code. So here's the HTML source code that is generated from our MVC page. Here's our action link, which creates an anchor tag, which is a link to the, notice that it goes to the students create action with the phrase create new on it. In the middle, we have our display name for, which shows the header for the full name of the student, which is student. We have Annabelle Lee here, which is display for, produces the value of the student name. And at the bottom we have the three links for edit, details, and delete, which are three more anchor tags. So that's how all this fits together. We use the HTML helpers. It creates the HTML that we see here, which then renders the page that we saw previously. So this little bit of code here generates all this code. So our razor code generates all this HTML that then goes into the web page for the view. So there are several standard HTML helpers that come out of the box with MVC. These are generic helpers. So let's just look at a handful of these and see what they do and how they work. So here's one that is a text box. Notice we have HTML.textbox. Textbox is the extension method, and this will render an input control in HTML. So the name, the ID is name, the name is textbox1. Actually, that's a mistake. The name should be name as well. Type is text, and the value is val, V-A-L. Text area, this is another HTML helper. We pass in the names here is address 1. We have 5 rows, 3 columns. Text area is a bigger box, kind of like a text box, but expand it, but we can have a larger size. And you can see how the code maps from one to the other. Password is a helper, and it produces an ID of PW, a name of PW. The type is password, and then whatever the value is. Checkbox produces an input ID with a type of checkbox. Radio button produces a radio button 1 control. As you can see here. A list box. This is called a drop-down list. Gives us a list. In this case, 2 options, male and female. And produces this. So you see how we have one line of code here that can produce several lines of HTML. So those are some of our generic helpers. There are several others. I'm not going to show you all to you here. These are some of the more common ones that are used. Let's look at strongly typed helpers. These are similar. The difference is it generally has the word FOR behind the name of the helper. And what these will do is, we can use lambda expressions to control the values for it. So let's take a look at some of these. Just a couple of them. Text box 4. Notice we add the FOR behind it. And also notice that we have a lambda, the M for the model. So these are strongly typed names. Before with the generic ones, we had to put the names in quotation marks, and we would not find out if it was wrong until we execute it. With the strongly typed ones, using IntelliSense, we can see immediately if the property is a valid property or not, in this case, name. So this will produce a similar HTML string with a text type input control. And notice the value comes from the model itself. Here's another checkbox 4. Again, we will pass in the property of is enrolled. This is a property in our student enrollment model. And this will produce this HTML. There's a couple more. There's several more strongly typed controls. I just showed you a few here. You can do a little research and find several other ones. So let's now look at some templated HTML helpers. These determine the HTML elements to render from the control itself. Remember how we did the model previously? We're using data annotations. So this will take advantage of the data annotations data type to determine the HTML element. So we have two we'll look at is display for and display name for. Actually, we saw these earlier on the index page, if you remember. We'll look at them again in a few minutes here. So display for, actually it's display for editor for. Display for renders a strongly typed read-only view of the model's property, and then from that it will select the appropriate HTML element based upon the property's data type and the metadata from the data annotation. Editor for is similar. It produces or renders a strongly typed editor. Again, use the model's property. And this is interesting. It will select the appropriate HTML element, again, based upon the metadata in our data annotation. So let's take a look at this. Let's look at the student edit view. So we have a view called edit, and there's several properties in this view. I'm going to show you two of these. The first is, notice we have several helpers in here. We have label for, we have editor for, and we have validation message for. We have three different HTML helpers in here. Notice these are all strongly typed. The first one to all take the first name from the model and pass them as parameter or arguments to the label for extension method. Again, it's strongly typed. So the first one takes the label, takes the label for the first name, whatever we call that. In this case, it would be student. The editor says, what are we editing here? And says, well, student first name, that is a string, so we will produce a text box. And then the validation message for is another string. Now for birth date, it's similar. Notice it's the same three HTML helpers, label for, editor for, and validation message for. Nice thing about this is it abstracts us from, as developers, as to how we need to render these different items. So a first name is a string, while a birth date is a different type of control. But our code looks the same for both of them. We are abstracted from how these will be rendered on the web page. Let's take a quick look at the student model. This is from the model. Notice we have first name. We have last name, which we're not going to use too much, but at the bottom we have the birth date of the student. And here we have, I'll get this to work. Nope. We have data type of date. Now for strings, we don't have to do that. It figures it out for us. But for here, we have the data type of date, and the data format says I only want the calendar part of the date. So here is our data type for the date. Now let's see how this looks when we render this. So here's our editor. Notice for first name and last name, these are simple text boxes. But for birth date, Notice it has a pop-up calendar. Again, our code was the same. The HTML helper, editor 4, looked at this, looked at our model, and said, oh, this is a data type of date. I will render a different type of control. So that's a nice little feature that the editor figured out how to render this and what controls to use. And all we did was say, give me an editor for this. So there are many other helpers out there. I recommend and suggest that you explore some of these through your favorite search engine. There are many that come with Visual Studio. There are some others online that you can find for free. A lot of shared helpers out there that people write and share with the development community. There are some nice packages out there that sell some other ones. And if all that is not enough, in our next tutorial, we will learn how to make our own. So again, this is Bob Dust, and this is part 1 of our tutorial for helpers. And later on, we can look at part 2 and see how to make our own. Thanks for watching.